Apple at Work is brought to you by Jamf, providing Mac, iPad, iPhone, and Apple TV management solutions for any business, government institution, or school at any scale. Go to jamf.com/9to5mac to learn more. Hey, welcome to our 9 to 5 Mac webinar today. Today our topic is the top 3 Apple IT mistakes. So a little bit about my background. My name is Bradley Chambers. I am the Director of Information Technology at a school in Chattanooga, Tennessee. I've been there for the last decade. I've been managing Macs, iPhones, iPads the entire time. We bought the very first iPad that came out, and I had to figure out how to manage it. We were using apps like iPhone configuration utility to actually manage these devices. And in the last decade, we've come a long way with Mac and iOS management. Currently, I manage approximately 150 Macs, 200 plus iPads, depending on the year. And so, while we aren't the biggest school, I understand the basics of this technology, what makes great deployments work, and everything that goes into them. It's not just about picking the right devices. It's not just about picking the right management system, but there's a whole host of things going in there. Building a great technology deployment is really like building a cake. You've got to have all the right ingredients. So, what's it like managing Mac and iOS? If you're somewhere that is a Windows-only organization, you know that those machines are generally locked down. And the Mac and the iPhone and the iPad, they're really meant to be user first, and they're really meant to focus on the user experience. And that's one of the things that I really focus on in my job, is striking the balance between security and end user experiences. Our technology devices today are very, very personal. We store all our photos on them. We have all of our music on them. They're our most trusted devices. And no one wants to get a device that's so locked down that it's unusable. So I really try to strike that balance on making the device work for the user first, but also, again, focusing on information security. And so that's kind of my main goal. That's where I come at from everything, is what's the end user experience like? And I think that's ultimately why the Mac has grown so much in the enterprise market. I mean, you hear constant stories of organizations deploying thousands and thousands of Macs, deploying thousands and thousands of iPads, because these are the devices that users want to use. My analogy is always that if you've got a great construction worker, you let them use the drill they want to use. You don't handcuff them and give them a drill or a screwdriver that they don't want to use. And it's the same thing with technology. I want my users to think of their technology devices that we supply as enablement tools that it allows them to do their job faster, better, more creative, everything. So I encourage users, treat it as your own. I'll help you in any way I can. My kind of good rule of thumb is I don't want you doing things that are illegal, but if there's a certain app that you need that allows you to work better, let's find a way to make it work. So focus on the user experience is my kind of main goal, and that's when you think of someone that manages Macs and iPhones and iPads, that's what they're largely thinking about. A lot of times on the Windows side, it's about how to lock the device down, how to keep the users from doing anything. And when I come at it from the Mac, the iPhone, and the iPad side, it's about how to make the best user experience. Now, our topic today, again, is the top 3 mistakes that Apple IT managers make. And you'll find we've got a pretty interesting discussion ahead. It's going to have nothing to do with apps or which iPad to buy or which Mac to buy. Because honestly, it's hard to make a mistake there. They all have their good qualities and bad qualities, and it's just going to depend on your particular environment as to the one you need. We're going to be focusing on the things around that. And so I think that's where people, they don't think through all the decisions. And just like baking a cake, having the wrong ingredients, even if you have the best of intentions, may make for a bad cake. There are things you can miss on your Apple deployments that make for a bad deployment, even if you buy the best Macs or the best iPads or the best iPhones. So let's get started. Number one, under planning on network capacity. So it is, it's nothing's worse than having a device with a poor internet connection. We've all been in a hotel. The Wi-Fi is so terrible that it's unusable. I personally would rather have no internet than slow internet. And so I think that most organizations, if they're making a big technology deployment, whether it's a manufacturing organization, a K-12 school, an enterprise environment, they don't understand how adding an iPad for every student, an iPad for every employee is going to affect their network. And there's a lot of things to consider there. Let's see. What are things you should consider when building your network out? So if you're moving to mobile devices for the first time, or maybe your school has a new program, what are things how do you kind of scale up your network? Number one, most devices that we're deploying nowadays are Wi-Fi only. Yes, you can add on wired Ethernet adapters, but by default, these things are Wi-Fi only. So if you're an organization that's typically, has relied on wired Ethernet, this may not be a skill set that your organization has, and that's okay. One of the mistakes I see organizations make is thinking that Wi-Fi is easy to deploy. And while Wi-Fi technology and the companies that deploy it on the enterprise grade have come a long way, it is still a unique skill set. It's not something that, like, if you're a switch expert, that doesn't make you a Wi-Fi expert. If you're a firewall and security expert, you're not necessarily a Wi-Fi expert. Just as, like, if you're the Wi-Fi person, doesn't make you a security person. It is a unique skill set. You're working with RF, you're working with various bands, you're working with 2.4, you're working with 5 gigahertz. There are different things to consider depending on the environment you're in. So again, remember, these devices are largely Wi-Fi only, okay? So how do you scale up a Wi-Fi network that works for your organization? Well, number one, you need to figure out the number of devices per person. Now, this will vary by organization. Now, it's not only the devices that you give them, they may be bringing their own devices on the network. Do you allow them to bring their own devices on the network? That's something you need to consider. So let's say, for example, you're handing out to every student or every employee an iPad, but let's say you can kind of estimate everyone also is carrying an iPhone. Well, let's say you can then estimate that 30% of those people have an Apple Watch. Okay, so you all of a sudden, instead of just one iPad per employee, you're looking at 2x plus devices per person. You have to consider that. Now, how will these devices authenticate to the network? Do you use a pre-shared key? Do you use something like 802.1x? Do you just have an open network? That's something to consider. How do you onboard these devices? There's a lot of different ways. I'm not going to go into all the ways that you should or shouldn't do that. Depending on your organization, I don't know. Now, some organizations may go pre-shared key, but just don't give out the password and install it via configuration profile. That will work. So other organizations may have a radius server and use 802.1x. Also work. Think through that, though. Don't leave that to chance. Have a system there. What's your VLAN setup? So if you're a school, do you put your students and teachers on one network and then maybe a guest setup on another VLAN? One thing to consider is the amount of traffic you're going on your network. Apple devices using the Bonjour technology tend to send out a lot of broadcast beacons. If you've got 200 plus clients, you need to start segmenting these off with VLANs. At my school, we put guest network on its own VLAN and staff and students on another VLAN. The guest network, they go straight out to the internet. I have an open network. There's no captive web portal. They get right online, but they're on their own VLAN. Now, another thing about that VLAN is they cannot see other devices on that VLAN. So they can't, try to do screen sharing and, file connections. They're kind of firewalled off to themselves. Again, just something to consider. Think through that VLAN setup. If it's not your expertise, if your organization doesn't have a full-time IT person, hire somebody to help you kind of think through that. Now, with Wi-Fi only devices, the thing I want you to remember is that capacity is more crucial than coverage. So what do I mean by that? Coverage is having Wi-Fi everywhere. So, if let's go take it, at your house. Do you have Wi-Fi at every inch of your house? Then you have good coverage. If your organization has Wi-Fi in every inch of your building, you have good coverage. Now, capacity is, can you handle the devices that are bringing you on the network? Because you can have an organization that has plenty of coverage, but cannot handle the capacity. You've got to plan for capacity. And again, if you don't have the expertise in-house to build a Wi-Fi network for capacity, you definitely want to hire somebody. Because again, users will think the deployment is a failure. They'll blame the iPads, they'll blame the Chromebooks, they'll blame the Macs, they'll blame the PCs if the capacity's not there. So you've got to plan for that. Again, capacity is more crucial than coverage. Now, one of the technologies I really like with Wi-Fi is dual 5 gigahertz. The 2.4 gigahertz band is unclean, as they would say. It is overloaded, and there's only 3 non-overlapping channels, 1, 6, and 11. So what that means is if you've got an area that needs dense coverage for capacity, you are going to create what's called co-channel interference if you keep adding access points. With 5 gigahertz, you have anywhere from 19 to 23 non-overlapping channels, depending on countries you're in and how close you live to the airport. So what this means is you can add additional access points to provide capacity without creating co-channel interference. So in years past, what people would do when they needed to do this, they would buy additional access points and disable the 2.4 gigahertz radio. That is fine, it works, but the problem is you're only using half of what you're paying for. A lot of vendors now have what they call dual 5 gigahertz radios, or dual 5 gigahertz access points, where instead of a 2.4 gigahertz on a second radio, it's 2 5 gigahertz radios. So it provides more capacity that's cleaner. The thing to remember about 5 gigahertz is it doesn't penetrate walls as well, and the distance isn't as long. So just keep that in mind. Now, 802.11 AC was 5 gigahertz only. 802.11n worked in 2.4 and 5 gigahertz. The forthcoming Wi-Fi 6, also known as 802.11ax, does bring back 2.4 gigahertz support, but your limitations are still there. It only has 3 non-overlapping channels. So again, I love dual 5 gigahertz routers. So what's coming with Wi-Fi 6 and 802.11ax? So every Wi-Fi technology up until now has largely been about speed. It's faster, it's faster, it's faster. And that's great. 802.11ac, when properly deployed, is fast enough for now. I don't foresee any time in the next 5 years where the speed I need will require something faster than 802.11ac. But what 802.11ax brings is high efficiency. So it's about a more intelligent network. It's about allowing more devices to be on the network. And there's a lot of technology and articles that are available you can read. I'm not going to go into all in depth, but just know that 802.11ax is coming. Now, currently, no Apple devices support that. I expect it to come. I expect possibly iPads in the fall of 2019 will get them. I'm not for sure about the iPhone this year. You never know with Apple. But if you're building a network, it does make sense to probably go ahead and think about doing 802.11ax. Again, the marketing name is Wi-Fi 6. But that's what's coming. It's all about high efficiency. It's not about faster speeds. It's about having a smarter network that has more capacity.
Apple at Work is brought to you by Jamf. Jamf is committed to enabling IT to empower end users and bring the legendary Apple experience to businesses, education, and government organizations via its product portfolio and its 80,000 members of Jamf Nation. Trying to configure devices without a mobile device management solution can take a surprising amount of time and effort. With Jamf, you can check your digital inventory, distribute Wi-Fi and email settings, deploy apps, enforce passcodes, protect company data, lock or wipe a device, and so much more from anywhere. Jamf helps you manage your devices so you can focus on your business or your school instead. Go to jamf.com/9to5mac to learn more.
Okay, mistake number 2. Making a mistake on BYOD, it's called Bring Your Own Device versus institution owned. Different organizations will have different opinions here. I'll give you mine in a few minutes, but you need to think through this on the front end and get it right. And when you pick one, you got to go all in, and you've got to own the good and bad parts of them both. Okay, benefits of BYOD, bring your own device. You as an institution don't have to deal with it. Number two, employees or students get to pick their own device. That's great. You get to pick your own thing. Now, disadvantages of BYOD. Okay, so let's talk about K-12. So if we do BYOD, one kid brings an iPad Pro, one kid brings a Fire tablet. Both are devices, are tablets. They have very different capabilities. So teachers will then have to plan around the lowest common type of device. Okay. Now, and same thing in enterprise organizations. IT will have to deploy services for the worst of the devices that might show up on the network. My advice, if you go BYOD, you've got to have a plan for everything. So when someone breaks a device, an employee, a student, etc., what happens when they say, "Oh, we can't afford to replace that"? So if it's a K-12 school and the iPad is an essential part of their curriculum, and they break it on a Monday, and their parents say, "We can't afford to replace it for 6 weeks," what do? Do they just not, be able to do the schoolwork for 6 weeks? If you're an organization and one of your salespeople, uses their iPad to enter CRM data, and they said, "Hey, we can't afford to replace that," what do? You've got to have a plan. Do you have a loaner for those situations? Again, I'm not giving you the answer here, but you've got to think through that. Okay, supervise all devices. Plan for that, especially on the iOS side. When you do this, it will require you to wipe the device, but when you supervise devices, you get additional controls. Now, I personally, if I had a device I owned that an organization wanted to supervise, I would not be happy about that. But again, think through that as an organization. If you have employees that are pushing back on that, that may be an area why you should think of institutional owned or company owned. Overthink your policies here. If you do BYOD, overthink your policies. Think of every scenario that's going to come up, whether it be broken iPads, whether it's going to be inappropriate content. Overthink every policy and how you'll handle it. Spend way too long planning this. Spend 6 months planning this with the committee. Overthink your policies. Now, before I get into number 3, I want to again follow up with I'm a big believer in institutional owned. I think it creates a even playing field. Every employee, student, teacher, they can know what to expect. They have the same devices. I really think that's the best strategy, and I kind of haven't come up with a good reason why the BYOD is better than that, other than it's slightly cheaper for the organization. But when I figure in the support costs, I still think that institutional owned is a better plan. But again, every organization is different. Just think through that. Okay, number 3. A big mistake I see organizations make is overspending on AppleCare Plus and their cases. You can waste a lot of money here, a lot of money. I've been buying, I've probably spent, $1 million with Apple over the last decade. I have never bought AppleCare Plus or AppleCare on a single one of these devices and have never regretted it to this day. Well, I take that back. If a device is like over $3,000, I'll buy AppleCare because the AppleCare cost is such a small percentage of the device because the AppleCare price doesn't rise. But 99% of the time, I don't buy AppleCare Plus because it's a waste of money. So let's talk about that. Most schools and businesses assume they need AppleCare Plus and or insurance. Yeah, it does limit your liability in the short term, but it's massively expensive in the long term. Okay? You think, okay, we've got to have a plan if a student breaks a device. Sure, you do. But AppleCare Plus and insurance is very expensive. So again, most schools think they need it. You got to ask yourself the question, do you need it? Have you ran the numbers on how much AppleCare Plus and or insurance actually cost you. So again, let's just set the terms right. AppleCare Plus is Apple's warranty that they sell that allows you to get broken screens replaced. Okay. Insurance is where, like, if a device goes missing or it's just it's kind of a third party thing. With AppleCare Plus, it is $69 per iPad. Now this is looking at just like the cheap iPad, the $300 iPad. It's $69 per iPad, plus a $49 service fee per incident. So if you have a broken screen, it is over $100 essentially that you are spending with the cost of AppleCare plus the service fee for a device that was $300. Over a third of the cost per device. Again, assuming you buy the low-cost iPad, for every 5 iPads you buy, you can skip AppleCare Plus and buy another one as a spare. Have you ever thought through that? Instead of spending the money on AppleCare, just buy extra iPads. Or just take the money that Apple is going to charge you for AppleCare Plus and budget that for repairs. That's what we do. I bought 50 of the 2015 MacBook Airs approximately 3 years ago. No AppleCare. Since then, I have probably spent $1,800 in repairs. Which, that's a lot of money. Sure, I don't like when I had to have a screen replaced a few weeks ago. It was not fun. AppleCare Plus would have been a lot more on all those iPads. Sure, it would have, I would have had no cost when I had need or very little cost to get, screens replaced. Instead of spending $600 to have a screen replaced, it'd have been a lot cheaper. But again, think about the money I would have spent on the front end. Think about what you'd be spending for AppleCare Plus. Think about how can I repurpose that? Can I buy extra devices? Can I just budget for repairs? Apple sells AppleCare Plus because they make money. And it's the same thing with insurance programs. They sell them because they make money. If your iPad deployment is running a 30 to 40% damage rate, you don't have an iPad problem. You've got a cultural problem with how people treat their devices. And that's another thing you have to deal with. Again, run the numbers. I promise you, they don't line up to where it financially makes sense to buy insurance and buy AppleCare Plus. Now, another thing, don't overspend on accessories. Cases, you think, we're buying these iPads for students, or we're buying these iPads for, salespeople. We want them to drop them. People can be careless. Sure, they can. But again, we're buying $300 iPads. We don't want to be buying $80 cases. I personally recommend buying cheap cases and just rolling with it, taking the risk. I have always bought cases that I can get for under $5, and then we preach to our people and our students. These are breakable devices. They are not cheap. We need to take care of them. So don't overspend on accessories. So, parting words. So, thanks for listening to our webinar of top mistakes that Apple IT managers make. Again, plan to have a great network. Plan for capacity with your Wi-Fi. Think through BYOD versus institutional owned, and then don't overspend on AppleCare Plus, insurance, accessories. Think through all those miscellaneous costs. People think the costs, iPads are expensive, it's $300. Sure, it's a lot of money. MacBook Airs, $1,000, a lot of money. You can add, again, easily 30 to 40% of the cost on top of that with things that you don't need. Thanks for listening today. If you have any questions, you can leave a message in the comments at 9to5mac.com or in the comments on YouTube, and I'll try to answer those. You can also email me, Bradley, at 9to5mac.com, or I'm on Twitter, at Bradley Chambers. If you have any questions or have any things you want to help me elaborate on, I would be glad to help. And then we look forward to talking to you again soon.